and welcome everyone to this episode of the Sports Insiders. I am Denzel Snipes, and this is Sean Russi, the sports agent himself, MLB and NFL, of course. Just got a quick few topics for you guys before we get you off to Thursday night football. Hey, I'm trying to get to Thursday night football myself. My team is playing. Matter of fact, I almost was not here tonight on this show. I almost was at the game. You know what I mean? But shout out to my cousin Q, man. But before we get started, just want to let everybody know to follow us on all of our glorious platforms. We are on Facebook. We are on X as well at Sideline Sports, and also follow at Confidential on X as well, and Instagram, and then also the 2-for-1 special on TikTok at Sideline Sports and at Sideline One Sports. So, with that being said, Sean, how's everything been going this week for you, man?
No, everything's going good, man. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. That damn tooth abscess had me sidelined for like last weekend and then up to now. So, but I'm feeling better, and I'm glad to be back on camera. So, so let's get into some MLB trades that have already occurred. Hold on, let me change that style, dude. Okay. Let's get into some MLB trades that have occurred already. We are only about 1 to 2, 3 weeks from the season ending. And Sean, take it away, man. What trades did we come across already?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a lot of minor things, but small things moving around, and we'll notice some of the pieces that teams picked up during the deadline kind of get shifted, and we'll touch on that here shortly. But so the Astros and Braves is the most recent one. Houston sent second baseman Mauricio Dubon to Atlanta for shortstop Nick Allen. The Rockies and Braves completed a trade for a left-handed reliever going to Atlanta for cash. Um, One of the more names in terms of being recognizable was Angels and Orioles. The Angels sent Taylor Ward to Baltimore for Grayson Rodriguez, the reliever. Um, Boston was involved in several trades, trading relievers, and a lot of those guys were picked up during the trade deadline by Boston, and we kind of figured that would happen. I believe we counted like 6 or 7 relievers picked up by Boston, and we knew they weren't going to keep them all going into the offseason.
Right.
So I think we'll see some more of that, especially I think Atlanta did something similar, even though they weren't considered buyers at the deadline. They did stock up on relievers, so I think we'll be seeing a few more trades from the Braves. The Rays and Twins did a similar move. The Rays traded a reliever to Minnesota for a minor league reliever. The Rays then traded a third baseman to Boston for a minor league reliever as well. So the Rays are shedding some salary, which is typical of the Rays at this time of year. They're probably not looking to make big splashes. Those are probably moves to get guys into extensions. White Sox also made a trade with the Rays that traded 2 relievers to the Rays for Everson Pereira and Tanner Murray. And then the Red Sox and the Rockies, the Sox traded another reliever, this time for center fielder Braden Ward. The Dodgers also made the first trade out of the gate after winning the series, trading a reliever to Seattle for a right-handed reliever. So just a lefty for a righty there.
Pretty much.
Pretty much an even swap of salary too. And even though free agency has been open, all we've really seen so far is players either declining their team options or declining their pending qualifying offers from teams. And then that deadline hit. We've got one more deadline tomorrow. So maybe things will pick up tomorrow, but I actually expect they're going to pick up in 2 weeks, kind of like last year with the Soto trade at the meetings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then. So, no real blockbuster trades out of the gate. Of course, Mauricio Dubon, longtime Astro, being sent to Atlanta. So I mean, you kind of figure, at the beginning here. I mean, if there's going to be any big time trades, it's going to happen a little bit later on. But initially, you get kind of the smaller ones out of the way. But with that being said, we'll move on to the argument of salary cap versus no cap, in which there had been an immediate topic for discussion upon the Dodgers winning their second straight World Series because they have a stacked roster with all these huge contracts and everything. So, some things of note here. So, the MLB owners are actually increasingly pushing for a formal salary cap similar to other major leagues. Now, the MLBPA strongly opposes the salary cap, arguing that it would limit player earning power and reduces bargaining leverage. Now, owners will point it to massive payroll, such as the Dodgers operating with a 340 million plus dollar payroll, as evidence that competitive balance is broken. Sean, you want to elaborate on any of those points?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of get towards why we're free agency is actually slow because no one really knows where it's going to go after the CBA expires December 1st, 2026. There's already rumblings of a potential work stoppage, and I'm assuming this is going to be the key sticking issue if we get to a work stoppage is this right here.
Okay.
We know we have the taxes in baseball already. We know the Dodgers have been over the tax for years. Somehow they've avoided the big penalty, which is losing draft picks. I think they are on the edge, the line. We'll have to look for our next show and give an update. But I believe they're on the line of about to be being penalized, with draft pick, removal because of how many years they've been over and into the luxury tax and not only the luxury tax but also the second apron of the luxury tax. So kind of like NBA where they limit your power to trade once you've hit that apron, with MLB there's harsher penalties. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But compare the Dodgers 340 payroll to say Tampa's 83 million payroll. Should that be a thing? I mean, does giving the Rays the ability to spend up to say 180 and saying that maybe the new luxury tax is 220, does that make the Dodgers that much worse at 220? Are the Rays still even in a position even to spend 180?
Yeah.
I don't know if it fixed the competitive balance problem. I think they started to fix it a little bit when you went to this draft lottery for the first 6 picks. That's been going on for 4 years. I
Right.
think they need to extend that out into the entire, maybe 10 picks or every team that didn't qualify for the playoffs,
Mhm.
versus just 6 picks, to make sure that, just like in the NBA, I think it was a couple of years ago, no one expected, the Magic to have the number one when Banchero was coming out, and they ended up landing the number one pick. So I think like that, where you have some randomness to the draft and not just, oh, let's tank, you're also going to eliminate some of that. So you want to talk about how you get eliminating competitive balance, stop doing the draft strictly based on records, extend the lottery a little bit. Cap will help, but I don't think it's going to help a team like Tampa or Oakland for that matter spend more money. Now, when they move to Vegas, maybe they'll have more money to spend.
They will.
I we'll see what kind of crowds they draw. The Raiders usually draw decent crowds until they start losing. Now it's a ghost town out there. So we'll see how they do. The hockey team out there does well in terms of drawing crowds every night. Obviously, they've won a couple Stanley Cups, so
Winning
that
Stanley
helps.
Cup helps.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm not sure a cap because of how many small markets you have in baseball. I don't know if it necessarily just that's the ultimate wand that fixes competitive balance. I think you got to keep looking at this draft and keep finding ways to make the draft, making sure the worst teams do get good players, but it's not always the team that tanks. Like the 7th or 8th place team should have a random shot at getting the 1st through 3rd pick.
Of course. Okay. And moving on, we will hit on payroll versus competitive balance disparities. So, a little further into this one. So, there apparently is a large and growing spending gap between high spending clubs and low spending teams, which owners believe actually compromises fairness. The current competitive balance luxury tax system is viewed by many owners as not strong enough to control spending. Sean, you want to elaborate on that one?
Yeah, so maybe, especially in discussions, maybe they'll look at something where the NFL forces teams to use a percentage of the cap over a 3-year period. And again, if you don't hit it, you're facing penalties. So I think that could be a move for them. where, hey, you have to spend X amount percentage of the cap number over this whatever period they come up with. Because obviously, with baseball free agency being 7 years out, they're going to have to look at some different ways in terms of the percentages and how many years they make them in terms of hitting that number.
Right.
Um, but I think that would be a way where you can make teams like Tampa spend a little bit of money. Now, here's the other thing, though. If a team like Tampa still's not drawing the crowd, how can you force them to spend money they possibly don't have? And then what
They don't
happens?
have, yeah.
Tampa's then looking to actually sell and move out of Florida at that point. And the same thing and obviously the Twins have a long-standing history, but they have not been great lately. What happens if a team like that just starts bottoming out and the crowd you're going to move the Twins out of Minnesota? Like there has to be, I think, something in place too, where some of these media deals give more chunks to the bottom teams in terms of money versus teams like the Yankees and Dodgers who don't necessarily need a bonus from the media deal.
Right. You know, you figure the three biggest markets in baseball are the L.A., New York, and with Boston. You kind of figure, right? Maybe you can maybe argue Chicago. You know, um, offering these deals and it's crazy because, like, well, even in college, like, you're not thinking cities, it's like the university kind of figure, right? Like, even though Ann Arbor is in the Detroit-ish area, but I mean, you got Notre Dame, which is an Indiana team, essentially. They're a farm state, but they got this huge, but they got a rich history, and they got the deal with NBC and Peacock and everything like that. So I know we're talking college ball versus pro ball, but my thing is this: if you do, like you said, if you do offer these deals to these smaller markets, you know what I'm saying? Um, to a Tampa Bay, to a no, I don't want to say Seattle. So to a Tampa Bay, to a Kansas City Royals, you know, or Milwaukee
E-
Brewers. Yeah,
even if you base it on attendance, even though Miami wouldn't be considered a small market, their attendance is right in line with a Tampa.
right. Right, and the crazy part is I wouldn't even consider Miami a small market. Like I've never gotten how a city can be a major city, right, and consider small market. Miami
It,
has like every professional sports team.
I like to call it a playoff city. They'll show up if you make the playoffs.
Fair enough. It's fair enough. But we'll move on here to our next topic, and that is the upcoming CBA expiration and a lockout risk. So, the current CBA does expire on 1 December 2026, setting up a significant negotiation showdown. But many around the league believe that a lockout or a work stoppage is possible for the 2027 season due to the scale of disagreements. Sean?
Yeah, like we touched on here, there's some big issues at hand for the first time in a while in the CBA. And especially there's, and we'll touch more on this in a minute when we touch on the revenue. There's going to be different money coming in. There's going to be, a need to split these deals differently. You can't split the media deal evenly if you want competitive balance as well. You've got to look at doing the bottom half teams getting a bigger chunk of the media deal, like I said, versus the larger markets. They've got to take a smaller chunk because they really don't need the assistance in terms of spending money and maybe reaching a baseline number in terms of cap percentage spent. They don't need the help to get there. These other teams that you want to get competitive on year out, and Tampa's kind of the anomaly, right? Somehow they're competitive, spending $80 million. Most teams
Mhm.
spending 80 million would be, where the A's were most years until this year, and that they look to be turning a corner as they move. But you've got to give these teams some way to also be players in free agency and not just sit back and take what's left. You've got to give these teams some way to be in the trade market and not just have to always get rid of that big player as he's coming up on his extension or his arbitration where he's outplayed his number. I think back to the Tampa Bay teams that had a similar staff to the old Atlanta teams in the 90s where they had Smoltz and Avery, and you had Garza, Shields, and Tampa, and Grant Balfour closing games. And you had to get rid of all those guys as they came up because you didn't have the money even to keep one of them. I think they kept Shields for a little bit, and then his number became too big, and they had to move on from him as well.
Yeah.
So you've got to do something to help keep these guys long term, because that's how, obviously, the Dodgers, yes, they go out and trade for a lot of veterans. The Yankees, yes, they sign a lot of guys in free agency. But the core group is the same for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They're
Pretty much.
changing a
Yeah.
couple pieces around it, but the core group is the same. Tampa doesn't have that advantage. They can't do that. We'll see what Athletics change when they go to Vegas, but in Oakland, they couldn't do that. Even to an extent, like the Angels usually go for one big guy, and like Trout's big on salary, and they usually have one more big guy they'll pay. And then the rest of their team is kind of just filled in because they've blown it on two guys.
Yeah.
And they and obviously being in the same city as the Dodgers, if they're playing on the same night, are you going to see Ohtani, or are you going to see Trout, who's now on the downside of his career?
On the downside is true. Yeah. And it was interesting how that whole time the Angels had the two best players in baseball, and they never saw a postseason. Well, because they were in the AL West. But
Yep.
uh, and now Otani's across town, and he's won two already. And like you said, Mike Trout's now on the kind of the downside of his
Yeah,
career.
they're kind of, building around, they're not building around Trout as much, but they're starting to move away and rebuild. So, and again, it's one of those teams that's going to struggle under a new system without some extra media boost to be like, here, this is going to help you fix, or addressing the draft lottery and extending it out to every non-playoff team versus just the bottom six records.
Right.
I still think bottom six records, kind of enhances the ability to be like, we're just going to tank. I mean, if you look at what the Rockies did this year, they pretty much said that from opening pitch, was we're not really going to be competitive from day one, so who cares?
Yeah. No.
And we saw that when they were on pace to potentially set the record for losses. I can't remember if they ended up breaking it or not. But they were on pace early in the season when they were like 2-28, and everybody's like, oh, they're gonna shatter this thing. But it was just one of those things where they're like, we're gonna tank and we're gonna guarantee ourselves the top 6 pick. But if you extend that out where it's even, say, the non-playoff teams, and you're up to 12 or 13 in the lottery, now if you tank and you end up 12th, you basically tanked for nothing. You threw
Yeah.
away a whole season for nothing, and now you've not only done that, you've upset the fan base by tanking. So who's going to come see you next year unless you make major splashes in free agency, or you really hit on your number 12 guy and he comes up and is just killing it?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And to wrap things up, we're going to go to our structured revenue issues. So MLB is currently they're facing changing and uncertain revenue models, including declining regional sports network TV money, shifting streaming landscape, and long-term broadcast instability. And because of this, owners are seeking more cost certainty and structural economic reforms in the next CBA. Before you dive deep into this one, quick question for you: declining regional sports network TV money, could this be due to streaming deals? Because isn't Peacock set to air? It's one of these streamers that's set to air Major League Baseball next season.
I believe Peacock has it, and then Fox still gets the Saturday games, I believe, even in that scenario.
Right.
I believe it's similar to NBA, where they're split over a couple nights between ESPN on Wednesdays and NBC on Tuesdays, and NBA TV Thursdays, and whatever. But this kind of touches back on what a few shows ago, where we talked about the regional restructuring too, where Tampa would be in a Southeast division, the Mets, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Red Sox would be in a North division. That would make more sense, a Northeast division. And that's how every other league is set up. Baseball is the only one that has some oddballs where it's like, how is Tampa in the East? Um, and they tried to fix it. I remember, Milwaukee to the Central after coming from the AL made all the sense in the world, because you have Chicago right there, you've got St. Louis right there. It made sense to put Milwaukee into that division. And I think that's going to be part of the conversation, because that comes up in 2030 when the restructuring could happen. That's going to be, I believe, another sticking point here in terms of, well, if we're going to go to that should actually help stabilize the regional sports networks, because now you're going to have it, specifically where it makes sense in the region, versus again, you've got some teams where you're looking at it like I'm not paying to see a team down south. I live up north. I really just want to see these four teams, and that's what you'll have now. Um, but I do think MLB has to look at, kind of like NFL did. Maybe even you start selling specialty games at this point. Um,
Mm,
whether it's you know a network gets game one of this and game two. I know they give them series right now, but maybe you go, hey, game one and two is yours, game three is four is yours, and maybe you really spread this thing out to bring in more media money. I can't see any streaming that be like, no, we don't want a piece of the MLB playoffs.
right.
Or like if you come down to it and MLB works some deal with Yes Network where Yes Network can be offered as an add-on to Peacock or something. I mean, just imagine the boost that would be outside of New York with the Yes Network. Um,
Well,
and then
one thing.
again, you make them
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
share what comes in. You don't just give that to the Yankees. You make them share what comes in, but you could start doing creative things once you have everything regionally based.
Yeah, but now as far as the playoffs go, right? Um, the playoffs are pretty much two networks, TBS and Fox. If not, because TBS and TNT tend to cover the National League postseason, and Fox Sports One tend to cover the American League postseason, and then mainland Fox hosts the World Series. Now, you do have a Fox Sports app. You do have a TBS app. You have a TNT app as well. You know, what do you think some of these? But it's been like that for so long. What do you think some of these other streaming apps are gonna need to do to steal one of those leagues for playoff coverage? Say for the National League playoff coverage to go to Peacock or ESPN or something like. What do you think? Because it's been dead set on TBS and Fox Sports for the longest.
Yeah, and I have a hard time seeing Fox let it go. It'd be kind of like Fox letting the NFL go.
Right.
I just can't see them letting it all the way go, especially the playoffs for MLB. The ratings are just like any other playoff, but compare it to regular season where there's not a whole lot of games where you could be like, oh, everybody's tuning into this regular season MLB game. Even the Sunday night ones, not everybody's sitting there tuning in. But the playoffs, especially if your team is in it, regardless if your team is playing that night, you're probably watching to see who you're facing next or what they're doing. The ratings difference in baseball playoff wise compared to regular season is it's almost as large as hockey. When you look regular season to playoff ratings. So I think it's just one of those things where Fox won't let it go, but I think if Peacock comes in with a strong enough offer where you're equal to TBS, again, maybe splitting the series isn't such a hard pill for TBS to swallow. Also, since TBS, I noticed this year they started doing the multi-broadcast like they did during the March Madness, where the games were also simulcast on True TV and some of their
Yes.
other networks that they own. So I wonder what MLB's cut of the simulcast was, and if that could be a sticking point in terms of MLB going, hey, your offer was this. This network came in later. We don't even have this network on our old contract because there was no TBS True TV merger at this point. What are we going to get from you now simulcasting our games, or we're going to walk over there for the same amount of money?
Hmm. Oh, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, with that being said, that was the ins and outs of the business side of sports, beginning with the MLB offseason. We have run out of time, folks. Thank you all for tuning in for this episode of the Sports Insiders. Almost called us by our old name, but we will see you all next week with more Sports Insiders. Be sure to check us out on all of our platforms: Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, of course. Some of you are probably watching us on YouTube right now, which is cool. Follow us and hit the like and subscribe button. Also added JB Ellis's Facebook, so if you're watching this from there, be sure to follow his page, and that'll lead you on to the wonderful world of Sideline Sports. So we'll see you all next week. Take care of yourselves. Be easy.